Welcome along to the Make It Count podcast. My name is David,
My name's Matt.
and we are the Taylor Bros.
That's right. We're still the Taylor Bros.
Yeah, and we started this podcast a long time ago.
Feels like a long time ago. Nearly, well, coming up on 2 years. End of
Yeah,
summer.
we're probably not far off 100 episodes, are we? I should probably
Yeah.
look that up at some point.
This is 94, I think.
Yeah, so you had an idea, I think, for this episode.
Yep.
Did you want to launch us off with the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in, this is coming out late June, so halfway through the year. And at the beginning of the year, we did some episodes about beginning new things. And recently I came across this quote from Simon Sinek, which I thought was really good. Read it out, and then we can get into the conversation. In some areas of life, value is unlocked by starting. Even a 5-minute workout or a short walk can reset your mood and benefit your body. In other areas of life, value is unlocked by finishing. It does you no good to build a bridge halfway across the river. You need to complete the project to realize the value. Do you need to start or finish? Are you building a body or building a bridge? That's Simon Sinek from The Infinite Game. I just really like that imagery and that metaphor of, oh yeah, are you building a body or you're building a bridge? Recognize what it is you're building. I think we've spoken lots in various different episodes, specifically from some of the habit cycle, James Clear, Atomic Habits, the power and the incredible helpfulness of starting small, establishing. But there are definitely other sides to the coin of like, well, is there something that you need to finish? You know, he uses the idea of a bridge. We've also spoken, Brandon Sanderson talks about if you want to write and you want to be an author, the most important thing to do with your first book, finish it and publish it, because then you are an author, you're a writer, you've got it published. It's not going to be perfect. Don't try and perfect that first novel. It's not going to be that. You know, that whole thing with Ed Sheeran, he talks about that. You can go onto YouTube and find that like first song he did when he was 14. It's rubbish. The music's terrible, the lyrics are awful, but you just got to get stuff out. You've got to get things finished out there, and then you can learn rather than try and perfect it all in here or in the secret place. So I like that idea, and I thought I'd throw that out and we'd have a discussion. We've started a lot of conversations about starting. Let's talk about maybe the contrast and finishing and what we can learn about that.
Yeah, so the Ed Sheeran one was interesting as well. I've seen that quote floating around a few times of just this idea of creating and writing is like using a tap that hasn't been used very much. And at the beginning, all this like gunky, muddy water comes out, and then gradually over time it becomes clearer and more beautiful. And until eventually it's like this, it's the clean, crystal clear water that you can drink from. So that's an interesting thing. I didn't realize this was a quote by Simon Sinek, but I have heard him talk about like the finite game and the infinite game and sorts of that game theory, which came from someone else in 1980. But yeah, that idea of what are we doing? Are we getting the value from just doing it, or are we getting it from accomplishing it?
Yeah. And I think I would like to ask you a question. Dave, is there a time when you have realized that value of finishing something?
Mm-hmm.
Can you recount the story of that?
Yeah, maybe I should have prepared a thought to that. Because sometimes, how would we finish things?
I mean, I can think of one. We've
For
spoken
me?
about it before. Yeah, a couple of years ago when you did the Habits for Life course.
Uh-huh.
And you spoke about how you'd put that off for quite a long time and you needed to just begin it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the value wasn't realized until you finally finished the final edit and sent that to Dan and Susie to get uploaded as a course.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Yeah, I'd had it in mind to make it, and they gave me a bit of a deadline, which forced me into it. And the first video, probably 3 videos, really weren't great, in my opinion, or as good as I'd like them to be, but they were done. Yeah. And then I did a second round of editing and upgraded, for want of a better, I basically refilmed them, re-edited a bunch of the videos. But yeah, that had a hard deadline, which forced me to finish. So yeah, that was, and obviously there the value came from me from accomplishing it, but also it was helping others to go through that course and that training to help form some habits and bring a new awareness and to those things. So yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Um, I've heard it said, already talked about this with writing and books and things like that. There's no real value in a half-written book. Only when it's finished and been edited and been published can any value really be derived from it. And there
Mm,
are some projects that there have to be a completion, whether it's a building a bridge, finishing a book, that's the only time you're going to get value from it. You finish a product. For me, it was that video course. Only when I finished the video course and delivered it was any value of any sort derived from it. But I think that's the bias. This is what I was thinking about as we were thinking about. I think that's our cultural bias, that there are more people that would lean towards accomplishing and finishing. But I think the reality of life is more that it is this infinite game.
yeah, I agree. Because I was thinking about this obviously in different domains. And if you think about the finishing aspect, he obviously uses a bridge. I spoke about a book. It's very much a project with a finite state at the end of it. There's either a way across that river or there isn't. The book is either fully in existence and published and you can buy it, or it isn't. And so that, but a lot of stuff is not like that. You can't say, oh, I've finished. Well, you can say you've finished a relationship, but you can't say I've completed a relationship. A finished relationship is not, we use that in a negative way, don't we? Like, oh, well, that relationship has now ended. So that this is not that domain. And so to do well in a relationship is actually I think almost be continually revisiting, and maybe it's a cycle of starting and finishing or whatever, conversations or something.
And I think Simon Sinek's done a number of videos and stuff and talked about this quite a lot, maybe popularized the idea of the finite and the infinite game, which probably needs a bit of clarifying. But I suppose the finite one, as I understood it, is there are known players with fixed rules and agreed upon objectives. So the best way of looking at that is sport. You have a football game, 11 players on each side. These are the rules that we've all agreed to play by. This is how long we're going to play for. And this, whoever scores most goals at the end is a winner or there's a loser. And then the infinite game there are known and unknown players. There are changeable rules, and the objective of the game is to keep the game playing. So ultimately, he says, business is an infinite game. You can't win business. You might be the number one business ranked in some category that you've decided, but you're not going to be there forever. That's for now. You can't win business. And so when you approach life and business with this way of like, we've got to win, we've got to beat our competitors, ultimately that's probably a wrong mindset because you don't recognize the game you're playing, which is why I think most people think you can win. It's about finishing the bridge. But who built that bridge? Maybe it was the local council or the local municipality. Well, after they finish the bridge, they've got to do other things. They don't just be like, right, we're done. No more bridges ever need building, or we don't need to do any more work here. No, there's still a bigger thing. So like our lives have projects within them, but actually if you take a step back, if you're a business, you might win an award, but that's not going to last you forever. It's not like we finished now. All right, let's pack it up, done. And it's the same. I think that's why it's healthy to think about that. You can't complete, like you said, a relationship. You can't, and he talked about, are you building a body? Well, yeah, your life is in your body many times, and you don't finish working out just because you got the body you want, or feel the way you want to. And so I think that's why it's helpful for me to think, well, probably my tendency is this way anyway, to be like, well, what is the life I want to live? What does that look like? And that actually we are more in this bigger picture.
I like that. And actually the body one's really fascinating because thinking about like the science is out there, the stats are out there, diets and doing a restricted diet for a period of time to hit a goal ultimately long term doesn't work, because you're treating it like a finite game. You're going, right, I have a target weight, I'm going to be on this regime for a certain amount of time and treat my body in a certain way, and then when I hit that target, great, done, wonderful. And then what happens? They say within a ridiculous amount of people, isn't it? Like the vast majority of people within a year to 18 months are back to the weight they were at the beginning of the program, because they've treated it as a finished game. So if you treat something as a finite game that isn't, if you treat it as I finished my body program, then you're actually setting yourself up for ultimately a long-term maybe grief, or not getting the ideal body that you want, because you've not said, actually the challenge is to daily restart again, and to daily go, I'm going to start living into this identity again, or I'm going to start living this way, renew again, start again. I'm building a body, not because every day the body has to go through certain things, sleeping, eating, drinking, getting rid of waste products, cleaning. Those things just have to keep on going again and again and again. You can't finish it. And it was something actually really interesting. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about, it's a slight tangent, but it was really interesting. They were saying about equality between men and women, and how certain things in Sweden, for example, are doing really well, and some of the laws and forward looking. But they were saying one of the things that's been really interesting and powerful is, as more and more women have been getting into leadership and business and everything, it's meant that there's been a strong pull for fathers to be more involved in the home a little bit more, strong sort of parental leave and everything. So that and they said it's inviting men into the never-ending work that women have always done. So for example, typically, you might go, oh look, they built that house, or they built that bridge, typically male workforce, and that's something that lasts for a long time, and you go, look at the work you did. But he's saying nobody's ever going, wow, look, she cleaned that house so good, it's never needed cleaning again, because it's endless work. You clean something, it gets dirty, you clean something, it gets dirty, you feed someone, they get hungry. It's endless work. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. There is an aspect of that in everything, but our pull, because maybe it goes, I don't know, this is where I'm pontificating, but it's that whole idea of being immortalized. And if I can't actually get immortal life myself in my body, I want to get immortalized by a work that I do, either literature or some great war campaign or some great statue or city. I want to be immortalized in my things that I did. Well, nobody can be immortalized by the way they cleaned their house, because it's going to get dirty again the next week or whatever. So
yeah, and I think that's why I think our cultural moment is about being productive. It's about ticking things off. It's about hitting the accomplishment and the achievement. Business. I think Simon Sinek quotes, there was a CEO, and he said, Wall Street, they're all about the quarterly revenue. He said, but I'm the CEO of this business in the US. I forget which one it was. And it's like, well, I want to be in business in 50 years' time.
yeah.
And he's going, Wall Street are saying it's something you can win or lose any given quarter. And he's saying, well, winning is still being in the game in 50 years' time.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like stretching that time horizon out. And you're like, oh, that's really interesting. And that's probably why you get, you see a lot of business people going independent, 20 years after being in, with a big organization, where they've realized, man, we just chased numbers for 20 years, like 80 quarters, and it's just more numbers and numbers. And 5 years in, we had this quarter, who remembers that? Like nobody.
Yeah.
It's whether you're still in business or not, and helping people recognize that. And I think that the interesting thing about it was then it's like, well, what is the point of just business keeping going? And there was another idea that came out of that, which is that the camaraderie of your colleagues to overcome something that is difficult together, that being the greater thing of helping others, of he even says, you go into a bookstore and there's a whole section on self-help, but there's no section on helping others, which I thought was an interesting thing. But I suppose, yeah, my leaning would be, can we hit those things and recognize, actually, you can't win or lose life, really. It's not, eventually we all die, but you might have a great day or a great year. You might be a prize winner for the any number of categories, whatever it is, sports or music or art or science, you could win something, but there's always going to be another award, and which is why it's interesting, because
Yeah.
the best example of a finite game is these sporting examples of football, of baseball, of all these different sports, but no team wins forever. You go
No.
back 50 years and, to the 70s, AC Milan dominating. Well, are they still the best team in the world? No. And at the moment, you've got other teams that are maybe the best in the world, but in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, will they still be the best team in the world? Well, probably not, because no team has 100% winning record. And so even in that like finite experience of a sport, when you get into the bigger picture, no team wins forever.
That's really interesting. Going back to something you say, you can't win or lose at life. I think there are tracks that you can go on where ultimately you lose out and everyone around you loses out, self-destructive behaviors and other destructive behaviors. But I think there's also, we're not in a zero-sum game. That's, I think, a massive part of the infinite game is this idea of, the old paradigm of business was like, well, it's win-lose. So if I win, you have to lose, so I have to negotiate so hard, or I have to do such a way that I'm winning so that you're losing. It's like, no, the better way of looking at it is very much this win-win, going back to Stephen Covey. And if we both work together well, actually we can have a bigger pie. It's not there's a finite pie. We can actually share a bigger pie. And I think that's part of it as well. When you're talking about your life, you're going, if I want to, if I go around thinking I've got to win this relationship or I've got to win this interaction, ultimately I'm going to diminish what's available for everyone. Whereas if I'm going, oh, here's something that I can build into and invest, and this, you're talking about the quarterly, the ratings of companies, and it puts me in mind of, that's the difference between investing and trading, isn't it? Lots of people who have no experience of have never read into it think, oh, stock market, oh, that's basically just gambling, right? That's just the it's like gambling, it's like betting, you don't know what's going to happen. That's trading. You're trying to bet against the house effectively, and you have a whole load of people that are professional at that, and they're more than happy to take your money to try and get more money for you and whatever. But investing, and it's this whole thing, Warren Buffett and your Jack Bogle and everything, who realize, no, basically what's going on is underneath that is you've got companies that are producing value. And if you buy into a company and you invest in them, you become a part owner of that. And so you share in the value that they output. And if you stay in the game long enough, you will benefit. And it's, Warren Buffett's famous thing is, it's not timing the market like trading, it's time in the market. And I think that's the same thing. Are you building a body, or, so like you can't finish the stock market. You can't finally, Warren Buffett is like, and his partner at the Berkshire Hathaway are like the wealthiest people that are, the most successful investors ever, but they haven't finished. They can't finish. And so that's the thing. Are you ever increasing in terms of your investment into these things? And I think that's maybe, it's interesting. I didn't think this conversation was going to go there, but we're maybe talking about this in sort of the starting is always putting, investing into these things long term, and the finishing is these milestones. And I think the bridge is a helpful analogy. So for example, in my career, there are certain things that I want to do that will allow me to get to the next step. But if I don't finish that, there's a limit, so I can't get to the next step. So the bridge is helpful. Have I completed that bridge so that I can cross that river, so that I can then move on into the lands beyond? So that's where I maybe want to be thinking about this. But then there are certain things along the journey that I want to be doing every day, or that I want to be doing every week, to continually start. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. And I suppose that's where the question, as I was reflecting on this in preparation, it's like, is it a way you want to live your life? Ultimately, that's the way to think about this, I think, is it a way you want to live your life? Well, if it is, start, well, do you, and maybe we've talked about this a bit much, but 50 years time, what does that life look like?
Yeah.
And like you said, maybe there are some accomplishments or some things you need to develop in yourself, competencies, characteristics, elements that are going to help you get there. But ultimately, there are many people that, work 16 hours a day for however long, but their imagined life in the future looks totally different from that. And actually, there's a way of, well, living now as you hope to live there, becoming that. Because hey, yeah, I exercise every day for a reason, partly because it makes me feel good, it makes me more alert in the present, but also I hope to be physically mobile and able as I get older as well. So I do
Yeah.
that now, but hopefully I never stop. Um, and so it's that way of like, well, I'm not aiming to just get ready for the summer, and then as the winter rolls around, put on a lot more weight and eat a load more food, and then that's not the way. It's like, this is a part of how I want to live. This is the way I want to live. So I
Yeah.
suppose that was a helpful question for me, because to hear you say it was like, yeah, there are certain, like, maybe professional landmarks that or that I need to get this qualification or this competency, and that's like building the bridge over the river. That
Yeah.
gets me to the other side. But ultimately, yeah, that only gets me to the other side. Who I am and the way I want to live still looks like this, and it's just because I've accomplished that does it, and it's done. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And just to, one final thing on that sort of the career aspect, for example, you sent me something the other day, which was really interesting, a tweet, and someone was going, and I spoke to an engineering friend of theirs who earns like high six-figure salary. And he said, well, what's your, basically, how did you get to that? What's your secret? And the guy just goes, well, every year I just read one engineering textbook, and that's one more than everybody else I know.
Mm.
And there's this aspect of, so yeah, are you building a bridge or are you building a body? So like, once there are certain qualifications in order to get into something like engineering. You have to actually have some kind of qualification, some degree, you know. Well, you built that bridge and you become an engineer, great. If you stop there, that's as far as you'll go. But the continuing on is like, well, I'm continuing to learn, I'm continuing to maybe read those books or listen to that, or find out the new things. And that's where, again, like, I've finished something, great. But if I just rest on that, if I sit on that, that's kind of it's what Tim Elmore talks about with the is it the overbalanced skill or something, where effectively you have one skill that you're really good at, and you just, instead of developing it or instead of developing other skills alongside it, you just rest on that for a long time.
Mm.
And ultimately what you'll see is in 10, 15, 20 years, the people that just plodded away, they will overtake you
Mhm.
because they've continued to advance. It's like, oh yes,
And
it's
this is
not glamorous, but it's the way.
exactly that, because and again, we started off with, do we need to start something or finish something? Well, you talked about that example of a writer. You need to finish that first book. But if you just finish it and that's the value, like, actually, surely a truer success is, now that you are a writer, you continue to write.
Yes.
But actually, when is an author, or someone that would say they're an author, ever really done writing? Well, they're
Mm.
not. Even if they're not publishing, they're probably writing, because there's something in them that wants to write. And so, it's part of a bigger game. That it's that way of thinking. Yeah, the project is to write a book, but the identity, the bigger thing, is being a writer, and that's writing. And
Yeah.
are you ever done with that? And so I think that was why, to me, actually, it's probably a more helpful thing to, like, realize many of the things we're in, is what Simon Sinek would say, is an infinite game. There are finite parts of that. There are projects, there are things that we need to finish, like you said, to get value. But ultimately, the bigger thing is, have I got friends?
Yeah.
Am I in good relationship with my spouse? And with my family, and am I living in the way that I want to, with the values that are important? Well,
Yeah.
that's not going to show up on a project. I might emphasize it in a season, but even then, it's like, oh, well, it's done now. I've focused on my friends for 3 months, so I can come back to that in a couple of years. No, that's not how it works.
Mm. And I think that's what, yeah, one more word on this bridge analogy. Like, am I building the bridge because I'm putting my all my hopes and my identity into that bridge? Or again, am I using it as I want to get across the river. So we're building a bridge, we're going to finish that project, and then we're going to continue going. So like, how many people get to the end of a career, or maybe a mini career or a project, and then boom, I'm now in vacuum land because I don't have anything to consume everything I've got. So it's like, ultimately, when you hang up your boots, which you will, do you look around and go, actually, I have built a beautiful life. There are relationships, there's things beyond just what I poured my professional services into, or if you so yeah.
Brilliant. Are we wrapping up here?
I think we're wrapping up here. Yeah, we're going to finish really strongly
Yeah,
on this
really
episode.
significant finish. But yeah, I think just, do you need to start something? If so, what? And is that the way you want to live? Or do you need to finish something? Bring immediate value to complete something. It might even just be the thing that brings you confidence from finishing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, we're going to finish this episode. So thank you for joining us at the Make It Count podcast. We've enjoyed this. We love hearing from you. So get in touch with your questions, comments, and emotional outbursts.
Yeah. Whether that's at the email makeitcount.pod@gmail.com, or our personal emails or phone numbers, or write a letter, shine a bat signal into the sky, smoke signal, anything. We love
However
it.
you normally get in touch with us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those smoke signals.
It's never happened.
Not yet. Right. Thank you for joining us. Go make it count.